Hi, I'm Jane Rudolph.
And I'm Msgr Charles Minor.
And I'm Father Joe Glass. Welcome to Reel to Reel.
As we were saying earlier, what are we Lenting on? The first Sunday of Lent, we talk about what we do and what we give up for the season.
Well, what are you going to give up for the season?
Chocolate cookies.
I don't eat them anyhow, so I can't give them up.
How about you, Father?
I take the coward's way out. I don't give up anything. I try to give a little more of myself
That's
time.
a good idea.
Yeah, and it's a good idea. It sounds good, and I still get to eat the cookies.
Speaking of giving a little more of yourself, tonight we're going to hear from a woman called Elsie Kowalski, and she gives a lot of her time doing tiny little crafts to help out those in the neighborhood.
No craft involved in Msgr Dan Murray. It's a very adroit idea. He gives us how the church uses science and religion from Genesis.
We'll be chatting with Msgr Mike Carroll from St. Charles Seminary, who's putting together a little bit of its 150-year history, and it's fascinating. We'll find out what happened to its first seminarian, and we'll find out how to deal with selfishness on our relationship feature.
Speaking of the church in this area especially, church news is big news, but there are areas across the country where the church is less than visible.
And we oftentimes think, though, Jane, of the church being visible as only institutions, and it's true. We need the institutions, we need the buildings, we need the various structures, but the biggest thing that the church does is develop a ministry of mission to the people.
Young people have always been important to the church. The church tries to meet the needs of the young through Catholic youth programs and Catholic education.
Some people talk in a large sense about community service.
Gus Palmer, a full-blooded Kiowa Indian, is a theology teacher at Bishop McGinnis High School. He is also a poet. Gus grew up at St. Patrick's Indian Mission. Since the early days, the church in Oklahoma has believed in the value of religious education. There are 18 Catholic schools in the Archdiocese, and each parish has a religious education program. Altogether, about 15,000 students are reached. It is a place where young people can gradually begin to learn how to see things as Jesus did and value what's important.
I'm kind of like a sponge. I'm a writer. I write poetry. I write reviews. I do things creatively with language. I live out of this context. I lived out of this awareness, I guess it is. That, to me, is my prayer. It's what I've been given. That's what I embrace. I think what I try to get across to them is that the idea, the essence of a creator and the relationship or the response of human beings and other living creatures to this dynamic force that surrounds us.
Thank you. Hi. You want Grandma to hold her?
Sister Imelda Schmidt knows a lot about acceptance. She's a Dominican nun who works in Canton with the Cheyenne and Arapaho Indians.
That's good.
About buying on this side.
Uh-huh.
And they're going to do this one later on.
Later on. Well, that's good. That's really good. And you can see better. That's the main thing, isn't it?
Before coming to Canton in 1977, she was a missionary in Africa for 11 years. She has a special way of being with people and making Christ's love real. Poverty is not a new experience for her. It comes at any time. This man needs some food.
I don't have any bread, but I think we got some flour there so you can make some biscuits. Okay? You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
All righty. To me, then, it's a ministry of presence more than of doing, and that they know that I'm here and that I can be for them in whatever way that is. Any soreness in there?
No.
About between your shoulder blades. Right there. Just to relax. I felt that the Indian people for whom I work needed to be touched for healing. There was a lot of brokenness in their lives, and that if there was some way that I could touch them to be healed, that was what I wanted to do.
Acupressure and massage may not be the kind of work one expects from a nun, but for Sister Imelda, it fits perfectly with her ministry. She believes that God wants people to be holy, and to her, That means whole in body, mind, and spirit. Sister has another out-of-the-ordinary facet to her ministry. She's an ambulance attendant. There's no Catholic church building in Canton, but there isn't a doubt that the church's presence is felt through Sister Imelda. When people in Canton are in pain, they know where to go.
She said that
She doesn't have twins, does she?
I don't think so. She has never had an ultrasound, but she said she...
Quality health care is also a primary concern to Dr. Patricia Dix. Dix teaches in the Department of Gynecology at the University of Oklahoma College of Medicine.
There is your baby. Right there. There's two babies, dear. Right there. See that? There's a baby and there's a baby. Oh, that's why you're bigger than you thought you should be.
Dr. Dix is herself a twin. She was born prematurely at 2 pounds. Early on, she was determined to live. She now works at making sure others have that same chance.
You don't go shopping. You don't do the grocery shopping.
The way she is with her students and patients has an impact on people getting well.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now you have to think of 2 names instead of 1.
Yes.
Get 2 cribs,
Thank
2
you.
car seats, and
For everything.
All right.
All right. I appreciate it.
we'll see you a week from Tuesday.
Thank you for your time.
Now, I'm aware of the things that happened to me, both at work and in my personal life, as a blessing. I've been very blessed. I'm intelligent, articulate, and healthy, and now I've been blessed with a wonderful husband. And those things are not happenstance in my life. Those are blessings from God.
Dr. Dix recognizes God at work in all of creation and is grateful to be the one who enters into the lives of so many families to bring new life into the world.
Thank you.
The body of Christ. The body of Christ.
There are as many stories about the Catholic faith lived in Oklahoma as there are people. All people are called to holiness.
The body of Christ.
And in Oklahoma, many are responding.
The body of Christ.
Jane, in all that diversity we just witnessed, it was beautiful to see that whether it was from the children to the doctor to the school or to the aged, the biggest thing was the church was healing.
We hope you stay with us tonight because there's more variety to come, so don't go away.
Since 1981, Reel to Reel has been proclaiming the good news by bringing you stories of Christian faith in action. We do it by roaming the Delaware Valley, searching for people of faith, hope, and charity.
But like all modern media, it is an expensive proposition. If you're a new viewer or if you've enjoyed Reel to Reel for many years, we'd like to thank you for watching and invite you to participate by actively supporting the show.
With costs rising all around us, we need your financial support. A donation of $5, $10, $20, or whatever you can send will help to keep us on the air.
Send your contributions to Reel, 222 North 17th Street, room 907, Philadelphia, PA 19103. And thank you.
Hello, I'm Gary Maddox. When I played with the Phillies, reading the pitcher gave me the advantage. But life is not a game. To give yourself the advantage, you have to be able to read. To get the help you need, call the Mayor's Commission on Literacy at 686-8652. Learn to read. It will change your life.
Joining us now is Msgr. Mike Carroll, who's the Vice Rector of St. Charles Borromeo Seminary here in Overbrook. He's the Vice Rector of the Theology Division, and he's a man who's been having a lot of fun recently putting together some history of the seminary. Congratulations are in order to the seminary. It's about to turn 150 years old.
That's right.
And you have the wonderful task, or the burdensome task, depending on how you look at it, of putting together some of the history and the heritage of the seminary so that people will be able to get an understanding of it during the celebrations, huh?
That's right. We're trying to put together a heritage room. Mm-hmm. The charter for the seminary was granted on April the 13th, 1838. And in the course of it, we're trying to put a video together that will summarize the life of the seminarian over the 150 years.
Now that's a tough task. How do you summarize a seminary 150 years old? Quite a difference in the church and seminarians, I'm sure, between the past and the present.
That's true, and that's the fun of it. the first thing we went to was the entry in the book of who was the first seminarian. It's all in Latin, but it says Patrick Bradley from Ireland.
He was the very first seminarian.
Very first, accepted in 1832, which was the very start of the seminary. And would you believe, in 1834, he was out the door.
You're kidding.
He was lazy.
Is that...
He slept too much.
And that's all written up there.
Right, but the history gets better.
Well, one would hope so. It couldn't get any worse. You were 0 for 1.
But as we're going through, what's interesting to see are the changes in style, the activities, but there's a constant through it all. It's the spirituality is constant. You see the focus is on the chapels. The humor is constant, and that sense of community. Yeah. And you read the smiles through all of the generations in the pictures.
That's great to hear.
Yeah,
I'm sure all the outward things have got to change between the hairstyles and
the long
dress.
sideburns in the 60s, the guitar.
That's right. How about way back in the 1800s? What was it?
Well, you know, that's extraordinary. We have photographs that go back to about 1887.
Were they mustachioed seminarians at the time?
Well, no. But some of the people on the staff were. But Abner Doubleday would have been thrilled because we have a picture from 1887 of a ball game out on the front yard.
Of 1887?
1887. Yeah. Wow. And then a few pictures for the 25th anniversary of the rector that time, who later became Bishop Fitzmaurice, and the stage all set up with this antique furniture that people would die to get a hold of today. Then as we progress through the centuries, you see some subtle changes, some interesting faces in the crowd, like Cardinal Doherty is a seminarian. Yeah. We have a photograph, and his face doesn't change throughout history. And but you see the old equipment, the basketball equipment, the knee guards, you know, the fellas in the gym.
And pretty soon as you're going, you're seeing electric guitars and things.
Oh, yes, yes. And 2 Street gets in there. There's a shot of some of the fellas up in the dorms dressed up as mummers.
The mummers parade. Now, your seminary has been in the news. Your current rector, Msgr. De Lorenzo, has recently been named the Auxiliary of Scranton.
That's right.
And that certainly made the news and headlines here in the Delaware Valley, but it's not so unusual, is it, in your history of that seminary?
No,
You've
it
got
isn't.
Quite a good number of bishops and prominent church people serving the whole country. Huh?
That's true. Our first rector, of course, was the Bishop of the Diocese, Francis Kenrick. And his brother was the second rector who became Archbishop of St. Louis. And as you go through the history of the rectors of the seminary, you see them as bishops in Monterey, Los Angeles, Omaha, and in Pennsylvania, Erie, Harrisburg, Scranton.
Right. I know across the river in our own state, Bishop Hughes from Metuchen has come through the St. Charles Seminary. Right?
That's true.
He used to be dean, what was he, Dean of Men?
He was Dean of Men when I was a student, and he survived.
He made it.
He made it.
What do you attribute it to? There really is quite a long line of very illustrious leaders in the church coming through there. It's a tribute to them, and it's a tribute to the institution, to the seminary.
I think so. I've been trying to think, why is this? And as I was getting into the history, there were an extraordinary gifted faculty in its early history that I think established a tradition. Herman Heuser, who founded the American Ecclesiastical Review, Monsignor Corcoran, who I think may have been the only Peritus at Vatican I from the United States who was a Southerner. Other names like Schulte and Siegfried, and it goes down the line. So I think it's that kind of dedication.
So the quality of the education.
That's right.
How about, just in closing, we only got 60 seconds, how about a word on the seminary today? How's it doing today?
The seminarians and their quality, they're wonderful, but we don't have enough.
We don't have enough.
We don't have enough.
That's true in the Delaware Valley, and it's true in the church around our country.
That's right.
Thank you for being here with us, Monsignor. And in closing, I thank you, and I encourage you all to do your part. Pray for vocations and encourage those around you. It's a wonderful life, and Monsignor and I can both attest to that, and I know Monsignor can, and I'm going to turn it right back to you now, Monsignor and Jane.
One of the big things I get, Jane, is the spirit of generosity within the seminary, from the faculty to the students, and I believe, with as Monsignor Carroll says today, about the happiness of the students and the few students there are, there's still a great generosity there.
Speaking of generosity, it's some sort of a value that we learn as children, sharing and caring, maybe way back to kindergarten days. But then as we get older into the me generation, we can forget that. Yet in relationships, there are avenues to move away from selfishness.
One of the first concepts that many of us learned as children is not to be selfish. Now, unfortunately, many of us as adults have forgotten those earlier concepts, and the result in marriages is not good. In fact, selfishness in our society is almost a disease in which people place themselves, material possessions such as cars, stereos, etc., ahead of their most important loving relationships. This can be disastrous in marriages because a degree of self-denial is essential to have a successful loving relationship. Selfishness causes people to turn in on themselves and to not be sensitive to those around them whom they should love.
Frequently, when self-centeredness occurs in a marriage, it comes because we might have been raised in a family in which we were spoiled and all our needs were met without us having to take a lot of responsibility for ourselves. Or perhaps just the opposite was true, and we were raised in a family in which none of our needs were met, or very few of them, and we hope that our husband or wife will be able to make up to us for it. In either family situation, we may have brought from it some very rigid beliefs that do not help us to share with our partner emotionally. Let's take a look at some of these beliefs. First, one of the dysfunctional beliefs is I must have things my own way. Another one, I can say anything I want to my wife or husband in any way that I want to say it. And lastly, if my partner really loved me, they would know what I want, and of course they would end up giving to me what I want. All of these beliefs lead to a certain type of selfishness in marriage, and they need to be replaced by more flexible thinking.
Now, there are a number of steps that can be taken to diminish the role of selfishness in a marriage. The first is to daily try to be sensitive to your spouse and to the best of your ability to meet their emotional needs. Secondly, in order for that to happen, one needs to communicate, and to communicate regularly in a gentle and a courteous way. Thirdly, you might let go of a need to have things your way all the time. Fourthly, try to make a decision to let go of selfishness and the materialistic values of our society. In so doing, this may free up more time from your busy schedule for your spouse and for your children. And finally, if a person develops regularly the spiritual side of their personality, frequently at the same time selfishness diminishes and sensitivity and love grows in a relationship.
It's good to think about love in this month of February with World Marriage Day and, of course, with Valentine's Day. And keep that in mind all during the season of Lent as well.
And keep your heart happy and holy till we come right back.
Today, there are Elsie Kowalski's quilts in some 14 states. Her work isn't limited to quilts. Since opening the gift shop, which she calls her lifelong dream, Elsie has taken on a number of new crafts.
A long time ago, I had an abortion. At the time, I thought it was the only answer, the only solution. Then I woke up one morning with this incredible emptiness, and I started to cry, and I couldn't stop. You see, I never really dealt with the reality of my loss. Project Rachel helped me to realize God's love for me and allowed me to find forgiveness in His church and in myself.
If you need help, call Project Rachel at 609-546-8945.
We welcome your comments and suggestions and encourage you to write to us at Reel to Reel, 222 North 17th Street, Room 907, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 19103, or call us during regular business hours at 215-668-9842.
Throughout history, the church has often dealt with controversial subjects, but perhaps not any more hotly debated than the theory of evolution.
That's why it's so nice that Monsignor Murray is able to give us today an insight to the book of Genesis, to try to talk about this whole conflict between religion and science. Monsignor shows us that there are very serious literary forms to be learned in the Bible.
First of all, it is important to recall that Pope Pius XII established guidelines for Catholic scholars who study the Bible. Those guidelines will help anyone in answering the question, does evolution contradict the Bible? Pope Pius taught that the Bible is a religious and moral book, not a scientific natural history. Further, he said, the literal sense is most important. and is to be found by taking a number of things into consideration: theology, history, archaeology, the analogy of faith, the life and personality of the human-inspired author, his times, audience, culture, and the literary forms he used to accomplish his purpose. The book of Genesis teaches certain fundamental theological truths. Among those that have a bearing on our question are the following: the existence of God who created all things, the creation of the human race in the image and likeness of God, and the fact that God is not responsible for any of the evil found in the world. Genesis does not teach the exact manner of how God created. This is why the advice of Pius XII on the necessity of studying literary forms is so important. It prevents the reader of the Bible from falling into an overly literalistic interpretation of Genesis. Evolution, or the transformation from lower forms of life through a sequence to human beings, is a scientific theory. Should indisputable scientific proof of this theory be produced, the teaching of Genesis would remain true. God created all things and created humanity in his own image and likeness. In his encyclical Humani Generis, Pope Pius XII taught that the Church had no problem with the professional scientific study on the part of the anthropologist and the theologian of the general theory of evolution, even of the human body. The Pope added two important qualifications, however. First, the human soul is immediately created by God and does not evolve from a lower life form. Secondly, the faithful may not believe that after Adam and Eve there were true human beings who were not generated from the first parents, since it is not clear how such an opinion can be reconciled with the sources of revelation and the acts of the teaching authority of the Church that put forward concerning original sin. Problems arise between theology and science concerning various theories of origins. Dialogue is in order. The Church teaches that theology and natural science are two distinct disciplines, each with its own proper methodology. Keeping the distinctions in mind will help participants in the dialogue as they seek reconciliation of scientific origins and the teaching of the Bible and of the Church's teaching office.
I think it's too bad sometimes, although I admit we have to talk about religion and science, but the book of Genesis is such a story of love, an undying love, present and forever.
And the loss of a loved one can often be devastating, but there's one feisty lady, Elsie Kowalski, who triumphed over tragedy with a lighthearted look on life and very busy hands.
Another morning in Scotland, South Dakota. And as they do on many days, customers are beginning to arrive at the local gift shop. The home of Elsie Kowalski, 73 years young, and a relative newcomer to the gift shop business.
About 4 years ago, my husband passed away, and I had a farm sale, bought a house in town, and I've lived in town since that. And I run a gift shop that I started last year. Welcome to my gift shop. Oh, this is nice.
And since last year, Elsie has made a small living out of her hobbies. After spending a lifetime on the farm with her husband, she has put the pieces back together.
Well, I didn't want my life to fall apart. You got to trust in the Lord and work with other people. That's the main thing. Keep a smile on your face.
And Elsie has kept smiling and creating and selling.
Well, just take your time and look around. Oh, yes.
Born the daughter of a Wyoming homesteader, Elsie moved to South Dakota at the age of 6. 3 years later, she began a hobby which she would pursue for a lifetime.
Well, the quilts I started when I was 9 years old. I made doll quilts. Then we had a neighbor lady that she had a whole bushel basket full of scraps. And she said if I would take that bushel basket of scraps and maybe piece some corners on them, she said there'd be enough in there I could make me a quilt top. So I went to work and I pieced corners on them and made a 16-patch block quilt.
And she has been making quilts ever since. Today, there are Elsie Kowalski's quilts in some 14 states. Her work isn't limited to quilts. Since opening the gift shop, which she calls her lifelong dream, Elsie has taken on a number of new crafts.
I make afghans, tablecloths, doilies, wall hangings, turkeys over there.
And the list
Lots
seems
of pot
endless,
holders.
as does Elsie's patience as she works on a special order, trying to duplicate a very delicate piece of crochet work.
People, they bring me different items. Can I make a copy off of it for them? So to my best ability, I try to make a copy for them. The most fulfilling part of my work is seeing the smiles on other people's faces when they see the different items that we have made.
She has had a long and rich life, but Elsie has had her share of heartache. Her mother died the same year as her husband, and a teenage son drowned many years ago. Yet through all of it, there is Elsie. She has survived, and in making a new life for herself, developed a certain philosophy.
Well, in the first place, you want to be cheerful. Always have a smile on their face for somebody else. Faith in other people. And try to overlook other people's faults. Don't go around carrying a chip on your shoulder. That's the worst thing a person can do. The most important part of my life is making people happy.
And how do you do that?
Keep smiling, keep working with them. Don't take no for an answer. Give them a little encouragement. How does that sound?
That sounds pretty good.
As we look back on tonight's program, I have one request. I'd love to see pictures of the two of you in the seminary.
They wouldn't be tintypes, I know that.
I look exactly the same.
Oh, of course.
No, I don't.
Well, we hope you look exactly the same next week as you join us once again. And we're going to learn how icons are made. If you don't know about it, you better watch.
And the icons brings us to prayer. And we have to learn from Father Tom Legere why we pray together.
I'll be chatting with Stephen Thorne, who's the chairman of the Black Youth Leadership Conference, and we'll have a little segment featuring the Flying Walendas. They'll be explaining it's their Catholic faith that really helps them keep a balance in their life.
That sounds interesting. So until next week, please take care.
Goodbye, and God bless you.
Good night. See you next week.
Travel arrangements for Reel to Reel by Atkinson and Mullen Travel of Media, PA. Phone area 215-565-7070.
Many people find retirement isn't as much fun as they thought it would be. Too much time on their hands, too little to do. The Retired Senior Volunteer Program has thousands of opportunities for retired executives, housewives, engineers, teachers, whatever your skills or schedule. RSVP has something to fit anyone's interests. You've learned a lot in your life. Share the experience of a lifetime.
Hi, we're young adults who attend the Charismatic Prayer Group.
The church often has difficulties helping young adults.
That's why everyone is so excited about the growth at the Young Adult Prayer Group.
We meet this Saturday, February 27th at St. Charles Seminary.
So if you're between the ages of 18 and 35, single or married, we'd like to see you at St. Charles Seminary this Saturday night.
Everything begins at 7 p.m.